Bullying pushed Baxter Stockman to become extraordinary, both physically and intellectually. But instead of seeking redemption, he chose a darker path, driven by revenge and unethical decisions. Were these choices really about survival, or was Baxter simply indulging his scientific ambition? Today, we dive into the cyclical journey of Baxter Stockman. Baxter Stockman was the first villain designed for the 2012 series. Ciro Nieli, one of the show's creators, based Baxter's look on his first appearance in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #2 from 1984. Originally created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, Baxter had been adapted for the small screen before. In his first adaptation, apart from the most obvious difference, he was also mutated into a fly. With playmates pushing for characters to mutate into new forms during the show's run, Baxter's transformation was a no-brainer. Ciro, a huge horror fan, paid homage to David Cronenberg's adaptation of The Fly by designing Baxter with one insect-like arm and the other almost human. He was voiced by prolific actor Phil LaMarr, who also played Jupiter Jim in The Rise of the TMNT show. But who was Dexter Spackman? Baxter Stockman started his journey as a delicate young child, and very likely an easy target for school bullies. Determined to set himself apart, and perhaps to outsmart the bullies, he decided to become the smartest person in the room, eventually turning into a technological genius. Unfortunately, his brilliance didn't protect him from the constant bullying. In fact, Baxter grew up to realize that his intelligence wasn't welcome. One of his most disastrous experiments happened during a school science project, where he built a volcano with real lava that ended up burning down the gymnasium, and as a result, he was expelled. Fast forward to the present. Baxter's first encounter with the Turtles occurred when he tried to force open a door using his mechanical armor. During that fight, Michelangelo accidentally dropped an AI-powered chip, which Baxter quickly grabbed. This chip allowed him to enhance his armor, turning it into an even bigger menace. After being bullied by the Turtles during the fight, Baxter made sure they landed on his hit list. Realizing they had inadvertently made him more dangerous, the Turtles tried to stop Baxter from terrorizing the TCRI building, a place he targeted as revenge for firing him. The Turtles eventually found a way to stop him and destroy the chip. Next, Baxter created the Mousers, which stood for Mobile Offensive Underground Search Excavation and Retrieval Sentries. Much like in previous adaptations, he used these robots to steal and fund his ongoing research. Unfortunately, he stole from the wrong people, the Purple Dragons, who were working for the Foot Clan. This put a target on his back, and Baxter was captured by Dog Pound. But rather than being killed, Baxter learned they had a common enemy in the Turtles. They teamed up, but when the mission failed, Baxter found himself forced to work for Shredder, starting with building robotic legs for Fishface to save his own life. The situation wasn't looking good for Baxter. He was bullied by everyone around him, from the Foot Clan to the Turtles. But this constant pressure became his challenge, a chance to prove that his childhood decision to become the smartest person in the room was right. That being the smartest person in the room could keep him alive after all. However, luck doesn't hurt, and when Karai captured one of the Krang robots, Baxter was able to use their interface to build Fishface's legs. Despite his success, the bullying from Dog Pound and Fishface never let up. Tired of being pushed around, Baxter set a trap for both his tormentors and the Turtles, hoping to get revenge on his biggest bullies. Against all odds, the henchmen and the Turtles joined forces to defeat Baxter, who managed to escape to live another day. While he was an enemy of the Foot Clan, they couldn't afford not having him anymore. Karai, who was in charge of the New York branch, sent Dog Pound to find Baxter so he could help them maintain the Footbots. When they found Baxter, he was working on creating a mutant army. Seeing an opportunity to benefit from their bullied scientist, Dog Pound and Fishface demanded that he demutate them. To ensure Baxter wouldn't betray them, they placed a mutagen collar on him, a device that could detonate to transform him into a monster at any time. But things didn't turn out well. Dog Pound was mutated into Razar, and after failing to defeat the Turtles, Baxter was recruited back into the Foot Clan. Baxter Stockman's journey took a cruel twist upon the return of the Shredder. After repeated failures to create successful mutants for the Foot Clan, Shredder detonated his collar, and as a result, he was mutated into a human fly. While this was the ultimate insult to his persona, it also granted him some enhanced abilities. He could fly at remarkable speeds, his senses were heightened, and he could even spit acid, though it served more for digestion than as a weapon. Escaping his captors, Baxter soon learned that the Turtles had developed a retromutagen, a potential cure for his mutation. Seizing the opportunity, he kidnapped April O'Neil, planning to exchange her for a vial of the solution. But Baxter's desperation got the better of him. Perhaps in a confused state of mind, he contemplated throwing April into a vat of mutagen, intending to dive in after her in a last-ditch effort to become human again. All his plans failed, and he was brought back to the Shredder after his defeat. Following his mutation into a human fly, Baxter Stockman became the Foot Clan's go-to scientist, the man Shredder relied on for the science of the week. But after Shredder's condition worsened following his fight with Splinter, the pressure on Baxter intensified. Desperate to regain favor, Shredder demanded a solution to make him stronger, and Baxter saw an opportunity. He developed a serum that could control the outcome of a mutation. Feeling a surge of confidence as Shredder became increasingly dependent on him, Baxter decided to go one step further. He would help his boss regain his turf. Using the serum, Baxter created two mutants, Anthrax and Scumbag. In creating them, Baxter wasn't just making tools for Shredder. He hoped these mutants would see him as their boss, even as their friend. For someone who had always been bullied, Baxter believed he had finally gained control. Baxter used Anthrax and Scumbag to help him rob banks. But when things didn't go as planned, Baxter escalated his efforts, kidnapping Casey Jones, April O'Neil, Karai, and even Leonardo. The Turtles, as always, intervened, rescuing their allies and defeating Baxter's creations. In the end, as Anthrax and Scumbag fell, Baxter did what he always did. He escaped, leaving his so-called friends behind. Once again, his own survival was the only thing that mattered. In a desperate bid for more power, Shredder pressured Baxter to inject him with an unstable strain of mutagen. Despite Baxter's warnings, Shredder insisted. This turned him into the Super Shredder. Baxter spent the following weeks refining the formula, stabilizing the mutation just in time for Shredder's transformation to be complete. But Baxter's personal journey was about to take an unexpected turn. During the final confrontation with the Turtles, Baxter tried to stop them from reaching his master. It was then that Mikey threw a retromutagen capsule his way, transforming him back into a human. This wasn't what Baxter wanted. In fact, he had been able to demutate himself at any point, but he chose not to. As a fly, he was smarter, faster, stronger. His mutation had given him abilities that made him feel more in control than he ever did as a human. And for the first time in his life, people respected him, or at least feared him, as a mutant. Returning to his frail human body was a crushing blow to his ego and his power. Ironically, it was Mikey's mistake that started Baxter down this path when he lost the AI-powered chip during their first battle. And now, Mikey was responsible for bringing him full circle, back to where it all began. With Shredder dead and the Foot Clan dismantled, Baxter found himself right back at the beginning of his journey. Human, weak, bullied, and without any financial support. That was the end of Baxter's story. The character made appearances in the new animated adventures comic published by IDW. Set in the same universe as the 2012 show, these stories couldn't take too many risks, but gave Baxter more opportunities to wreak havoc. In one of these tales, Baxter teamed up with Spider Bites to rob banks, with the excuse of funding the parts for the Shredder's projects. That book was later relaunched as Amazing Adventures. This time, it wasn't tied to the show's canon, allowing for more creative freedom. One of the most interesting storylines gave Baxter an alternate ending in the Robot Animals miniseries. In that story, Baxter was still a fly, and he used nanobots to turn mutants, including Anthrax and Scumbag, into robots. With this invention, he was able to make mutanimals his henchmen. The Turtles found a way to infect the nanobots and free all the mutants under Baxter's control. But Stockman still had an ace up his sleeve. He used another vial of nanobots and transformed himself into some sort of mutated robot. The Turtles caused an EMP, which apparently killed Baxter. And that could have been an alternate ending for the star of this video. Baxter Stockman could have been many things, but by never overcoming his childhood trauma, he fell into a cyclical journey, always seeing himself as a victim, becoming the architect of his own self-fulfilling prophecy. From his early days as a bullied genius, Baxter saw power and control over the world that rejected him. His mutation into a fly, far from being a curse, became the ultimate form of validation, finally giving him the strength and intelligence he craved. Throughout his time with the Foot Clan, Baxter continually justified his unethical experiments and betrayals as necessary for survival. To him, working under Shredder's oppressive rule wasn't about loyalty. It was a challenge, a way to use his science to stay alive. It reinforced his conviction that becoming the smartest person in the room was the right choice. After all, how smart was he? He was still alive because of it. Even when presented with the chance to return to humanity, he resisted. As a mutant, for the first time, he had the respect and fear he longed for. But as fate would have it, Baxter was ultimately brought back to where he started. Human, vulnerable, and alone. Returning to his human form meant a new challenge for Baxter. How could he justify his unethical actions when there was no one left to victimize him? What do you think of Baxter's cyclical journey? Could the Turtles have helped him break the loop if they hadn't bullied him? Or would he have found another reason to be a horrible person? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.